This is Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small. I was just watching the final vote in the United States Senate in regards to the impeachment of Trump. I think that we can say to a marked degree our rule of law in the United States is being impaired. The lesson taught by this iteration of the Republican Party in the United States is it's okay to kill people in the Capitol building and try to stage a coup. You'd better not get a blowjob in the Oval Office. Now, somehow, I think those aren't really good values. Trump represents freedom and democracy no more than any would-be dictator. He has no respect for democracy. He has no respect for knowledge. It's unfortunate, although it is heartening that 7 Republicans voted to find him guilty, and he was guilty. He not only encouraged those people to march down to the Capitol, march down Pennsylvania Avenue, I'll be there with you. He did nothing when he was informed. As Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, as somebody who had sworn an oath under the Constitution to protect and defend it, he did nothing to call them off. Members of the United States Senate were members of the Republican Party and who voted not guilty. Voted not guilty in large, well, couldn't have been because of the evidence. The evidence clearly established he encouraged insurrection. Their only claim either would have to be imbecility, and given some of the members of the Senate who are from this iteration of the Republican Party, that would be a valid claim, or because of fear. Because a mob came in and looted the United States Senate chambers. A mob came in and looted the Capitol building. A mob came in and as a result, 5 people died. Those members of the Senate who are members of this iteration of the Republican Party fear as much for their lives as they do their seats. I don't know, maybe they fear losing their seats in the Senate more than losing their lives. I'm really not sure at this point. Everything's so crazy. But at least 7 members of this iteration of the Republican Party chose to show some courage and vote guilty. I'm scared right now for our country because I think that we have enough people who either don't understand what our government is and what it's supposed to be, or don't care. This is a republic. That means it's a government with representatives placed in office based on democratic principles. Those democratic principles reside in the notion that the majority rules. Minorities have rights. All people have rights. But the majority rules. One vestige of slavery that's still present today in this country is the means by which we select what the framers of the Constitution called the chief magistrate, what we call the President of the United States. That vestige is electors, because they had to come up with a means by which they could choose the chief magistrate. That was one of the last things upon which they decided at the Constitutional Convention in 1787. And they started in May. It was kind of hectic. during that summer, the delegates to the Constitutional Convention, there were 73, I've read 74 altogether chosen, 55 attended at one time or another, 39 were present at the end when the Constitution was signed by 36 delegates. 3 refused to. 2 later reconsidered and signed. But delegates came in and out of the convention over the course of the summer. They had personal business to attend to. Some were members of Congress. They had to go back up to New York. That's where Congress was meeting. So there are things going on during the summer, and it wasn't something that they wanted to push back, and they wanted to get something done. Some scholars take the view that they just were wanting to get it done and came up with whatever they could at the end. And they had compromised on a lot of things. They sat as a committee of the whole, so that if as a committee of the whole they decided on something, then it wasn't really final. And they could set something aside and come back to it, so that they could have something at the end that would be an optimal thing for them. The one compromise that the delegates to the Constitution of the United States made was on something that's not even mentioned, not named in the original Constitution, and that's slavery. They wanted to preserve slavery. 20 of the 55 delegates claimed ownership over other human beings, at least 20. They didn't want to end that institution. For one thing, it was profitable for a lot of people. For another, those who didn't agree with slavery as such were afraid that if they outlawed it, that it would cause the southern colonies, former colonies, to not join the Union. Now think about that. What would have happened to this country if South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia, those states that were part of the Deep South and part of the not so deep South, Virginia, what if those states had gone on their own? We wouldn't have been as great of an economic power. So what? We wouldn't have been as great of a military power. So what? This country condoned slavery. This country, and prior to it, the colonies that became this country, condoned, recognized, protected, fostered slavery, chattel slavery, where people are just bought and sold like items of property, which is what they were, for longer than slavery has been illegal. Think about that. Slavery has been illegal in the United States for a shorter period of time than it was legal or protected prior to that, since Europeans came to this continent. So we have a huge problem there. We won't recognize. We allow these electors to choose a president, and as a consequence of that, I've heard these idiots, and by the way, you can call in here to Civil Discourse now, 317-517-2037. I've heard these idiots talk about, well, they're trying to disenfranchise the people in the flyover states. They're trying to take away our votes. How? Look at the people in the flyover states. In other words, states that aren't on the coasts. Wyoming has 3 votes, 3 electors. There is no electoral college mentioned in the Constitution as well. People call it, but it's the electors. They have 3 electors. They have more electors per capita than the people in California. We have 57 electors, but a whole lot more people. So a state that's relatively backward, and I'll use that word to describe them, places that have lower median levels of education, those places have more electors and more of a say in government than places with a higher level of education. And that's how people like Trump have gained power, leveraged power. And when people who favor Trump start talking about how great he is and how they're more American than anybody else, they have the gall to say freedom. That's not what he represents. He represents dictatorship. I had to drive to the southern part of the state today, in Indiana. On one stretch of about 15 miles of state highway, I saw 3 Confederate flags. People flying Confederate flags. 2 of those instances, there was an American flag underneath which was a Confederate flag, underneath which was a Trump-Pence flag. And before anybody out there says, well, that's not a Confederate flag, that's a battle flag in Northern Virginia, whatever. It represents the Confederacy, racist bastards that committed genocide. People were flying those flags. We shouldn't ignore that. People are so ignorant that they're proud that that's part of the heritage of this country. It's out there. It's pathetic. And it's alarming. So, I guess next time, Trump or one of his vile, scummy children will know how to go about this the correct way. Or maybe one of the people that's been watching this, maybe one of the people that's a fan of Putin, or on the pay of Putin, or somehow under Putin's control, will know how best to execute it next time. Maybe know how to execute the plan and execute enemies at the same time. Because that's what they intend to do. The United States Constitution is full of paradoxes and contradictions. But one wasn't mentioned. It's the one that haunts us today, and the one that now white supremacists, racists want to somehow deny. That's slavery. That's what's at the base of so much of what has happened. It's hatred, it's ignorance, bigotry. Well, at least 7 Republicans showed courage and had a sense of morality. I don't think that any of those 7 was from Indiana. I'm pretty sure, I know that Young voted not guilty. How do you explain, Mr. Young, your pledge to preserve and defend, protect the Constitution of the United States in the face of someone who encouraged a mob to go down the street and invade the Capitol? How do you explain that? Mr. Braun, how do you explain that? Well, Mr. Young is in the military. He graduated from one of the service academies. I don't know. When I look at this, and I see that people who Thank you. That's the United States Postal Service delivery. That's one of the things that we have in my government. One of the oldest governmental functions. It's one of the first things enacted by the Continental Congress, the United States Postal Service. Trump wants to get rid of it. He wants you to have to pay more money to his buddies. So, when you go to sleep tonight, just realize that tomorrow, you better make sure you're registered to vote. And we've got a whole lot of work to do to protect ourselves and to protect the Constitution of the United States. It's in jeopardy. And if you're so sanctimonious as to sit there and say, I'm for him, I'm for Trump, you can go to hell. I'm Mark Small, Civil Discourse Now. Thank you.